How would you feel about a law that requires people over the age of 70 to pass a specialized driving test in order to continue driving? Here in Illinois, my grandpa had to do it every year after 75.
That's a great idea. I'm going to call my 8-year-old congressman and ask him to support such legislation. Edit: most driving laws are passed by state legislators, who usually do drive themselves.
My fiance's brother was killed riding his motorcycle Sunday by a 91-year-old who pulled out in front of him. He left behind a wife and 3 children. He was one of the best guys I ever met. We are all devastated, and it could have been prevented. That man had no business behind the wheel. Everyone should take a standardized road test every 5 years. Retest with license renewal every 10 to 20 years by default, IMO.
IMO driving tests in the US need to be more difficult and have the driver face most every scenario with at least 2 versions of each. In addition, this should have to be renewed every 5 or 10 years with your DL. I am a fire engine driver in OC, LA and CA, and there are too many drivers, Garden Grove and DTLA, that don't know to pull over and just stop, or try and make their turn before we catch up. Car accidents are the leading fatality for a reason. Secret to old life like Japan? Better driving habits and rules. Please. My grandma is practically blind and went to take her driving vision test to renew her license. She failed, but the lady at the DMV felt bad, so she had her take it again and gave her hints so she could pass it. So now my practically blind grandma is out on the roads still. It's for their safety as much as anyone else's. I'm so mad that the lady at the DMV was so irresponsible as to let her keep driving.
This has been tried, but the organizations like AARP are very powerful and shoot down this type of legislation.
I'd be okay with it if over 70 drivers are statistically more likely to get into accidents.
Cop here. I can only speak from my experience, but I've dealt with many more crashes involving teens to 30s than elderly folks. Mostly because the younger folks are eyeballs deep in their phones.
I'm for it. The inability for old people to drive would result in them voting en masse for public transportation improvements.
It won't happen. I'm assuming you're talking about the US. The DMV is a state-level agency, not federal, so if one state were to have that law, another state may not have it.
My grandma rear-ended a line of stopped cars on the highway at full speed, no brakes, with my 5-year-old brother in the car because she thought she saw a deer on the side of the road. She's been in another, less serious wreck, and has come to a dead stop while on the highway because she forgot where she was going multiple times since then. My dad had to unplug her battery and tell her that her car doesn't work anymore so she would start asking for rides. I would love if they took age into account in some way. I'm not an expert on anything, so I don't know how they would do it, so that families wouldn't have to be torn between treating their elders like a child or worrying if they're going to get a call from the hospital anytime they're behind the wheel.
As an insurance professional, just because you have been doing something for a long time, does not mean you are good at it. Drivers should be tested every 5 years, not just once you hit a certain age. They should make everyone take driver's ed classes every 10 years. It's ridiculous to think someone who passed driver's ed even 20 years ago knows all the new traffic laws and car technology.
I'm an eye doc and I'd be all for it. You know how often I get berated or threatened by geriatrics when I strongly suggest that they quit driving because they no longer meet the legal requirements for driving?
Perhaps this would be best applied to the overall population.
My father-in-law had some muscular degeneration for a few years before he passed away. He couldn't physically lift his feet to walk, and sitting wasn't much better. He ran a stop sign, and almost hit another car and a pedestrian with my wife in the car because he couldn't move his foot from the gas to the brake fast enough. She took his license out of his wallet and threw it in the fire when they got home. He was pissed for a long time, because in his head he was perfectly able to drive, and didn't even recall his near accident. Who knows how often that actually happened when we weren't around.
I'm all for retesting people, however, I'm not sure what you mean by specialized. The requirements for good driving don't change with age, so it should be the same test.
Ideally, we'd all be retested every 10 years or so until we hit 60, then we're retested every 5 years. However, older folks are a huge voting bloc and it's unlikely this would ever pass.
All for it. When I was 14, my friend was coming to my house and he got killed by my next-door neighbor who happened to be elderly. My friend was on his skateboard and he was just up the street from my house. From the position of his body and where elderly guy stopped his car, I could see he made a super sharp left turn that killed him and ran over my other friend. The other friend survived and recovered from his injuries. But my other friend not so lucky. Oh, and my granddad has Alzheimer's and frequently forgets where he is, and I think he still has his license, though my grandma finally took his keys.
I send patients for driver's evaluations if their ability to navigate through my office is concerningly questionable. Unaware drivers are just as dangerous as impaired drivers. Or how about you just have to do a refresher course every 10 years? There are a lot of people out there with fully functional sensors that still need a reminder about the rules of the road. By the time the law was passed, self-driving cars will be available.
People should have to retake the driver's test every 10 years if not 20. I've seen too many terrible drivers of all ages.
Based on the state of driving I see every day, everyone should have to pass a driver's test every 5 years.
It's hard enough to book a driving test these days. It takes a good 4 months in the UK. This would worsen the situation.
Over 70. My aunt started getting dementia at 58 and should have had her license taken then and there. Test us every 10 years or with referral from a doc.
Can we make everyone take it? Seriously, I see more horrible drivers in the commuting age bracket than in the retired age bracket.
I'd be all for it if we can compensate them by providing transportation to those who can no longer drive for low cost. Self-driving cars may soon fit this position.
We need statistics to show us which demographics cause the most accidents over distance driven. If the over 70 leads in this, then yes.
I live in a town that caters to older people, and watching them drive is painful. By them, I mean end of middle age and up. From going 30 km/h in a 70 km/h zone, to watching them stare out the side window while going through that same zone. They swerve from side to side. I refuse to go anywhere with my grandpa driving, as he is now a horrible driver and has nearly crashed the car multiple times, then blames it on other drivers. However, I won't say that only elderly people need to be tested. I would hate having to do so, but we all should be tested. Just last night, teenagers drove over a school's fence in a large truck. People saw them, cops haven't caught them. Younger people speed more, usually 70 in a 50. In just today, I got stuck behind someone doing 20 km/h in a 50 zone, and then while I was going 60 km/h, someone flew past me like I was standing still. The roads would be better if we were all retested, and in regards to my town, if cops would actually do their job. Going severely under the speed limit is dangerous just as speeding is.
Old retired guy here. 74 years old to be precise. I would accept such a test provided it was only to catch really age-related diseases. Dementia, poor reflexes, etc. I live in a retirement community and most of the people who should not have a license have already given them up. The first day I was here I heard a conversation between two guys. Guy 1, I just turned 88 and turned in my driver's license. Guy 2, why would you do that? Guy 1, I don't want to spend the rest of my life in jail.
Consider subscribing.